What are you doing here? You weren't invited." The words cut through the laughter and music like shattered glass. Every head turned, every whisper stopped. I smiled politely at my son's bride, the woman I'd spent $43,000 trying to make happy. "I'm leaving," I said sweetly. "But before I go, meet a very special guest, someone from your past." When Jessica saw who stood behind me, her face drained of color. Her $1,000 smile vanished, and she collapsed onto the Italian marble floor. If you're watching this, make sure to subscribe and tell me where you're tuning in from. You're probably wondering how a 67-year-old grandmother became the architect of Charleston's most dramatic wedding crash. It started 6 months ago, when my son, Andrew, brought home the most beautiful liar I'd ever met. But perhaps I should start at the beginning. My name's Margaret Thompson, though everyone calls me Maggie. Until last week, I truly believed I was organizing the wedding of the century for my only child. I'd drained my late husband's life insurance, cashed bonds, even borrowed against my house, all to give Andrew and Jessica the fairy tale she'd claimed she'd dreamed of since childhood. The venue? The Bellamy estate, all Southern charm and blooming gardens. The dress? A $12,000 Vera Wang, altered 3 times to perfection. The flowers? 2,000 white roses flown in from Ecuador. Jessica told me her parents had disowned her for marrying below their social class. My heart broke for the poor girl who'd given up everything for love. I even offered her my grandmother's pearls, a family heirloom passed down for generations. "Oh, Mrs. Thompson," she'd whispered, eyes glistening. "You're like the mother I never had." At the time, I believed her. Andrew was completely enchanted. Jessica was one of those women who could stop a room just by breathing golden hair, soft voice, and eyes that made men forget what they were saying. She worked as a pediatric nurse, volunteered at shelters, and spoke about children with such sincerity that I caught myself daydreaming about grandchildren. But somewhere deep down, something didn't sit right. Her stories never quite matched. Her past shifted like smoke. She always paid cash, saying she didn't believe in credit cards. Still, Andrew was the happiest I'd seen him since his father's funeral, and that was enough for me. Until the night I learned the truth. I found out by accident the cruelest truths often arrive that way. I was dropping off wedding favors at Andrew's apartment when I froze in the hallway. Jessica was on the phone in the bedroom, her voice low, urgent, and utterly ruthless. "Marcus, don't call this number," she hissed. "No, the wedding's still on. Yes, I'll get access to his accounts after we're married. You want a larger cut? We agreed on 30%. My blood turned to ice. I pressed myself to the wall and listened. Behind Andrew's old hardwood floors, every single word landed like a blow. "She's already given us over 40 grand, Jessica said. "That Mark's worth at least 200,000. He's hooked. He won't suspect a thing. Mark, my son was a mark." I backed out quietly, hands trembling so badly, I nearly dropped the box of favors. In the car, I pulled over and let the air leave my lungs in shuddering sobs. The cash, the gaps in her stories, the way she'd subtly isolated Andrew from friends, it all snapped into place. She'd even convinced him to add her to his checking account and to boost his life insurance. Everything looked like love. Everything was a con. I sat there for an hour, furious and humiliated, until something in me hardened. The same determination that had carried me through my husband's illness rose up again. If Jessica thought she could take my son and his money, she'd picked the wrong family. But I needed proof, something ironclad that would shatter the illusion and make denial impossible. I went home and did something I never imagined I would. I searched for a private investigator in Charleston. The next morning, I met Patricia Hayes, a no-nonsense former detective turned fraud investigator, in a corner cafe. "What you're describing sounds like a romance scam," she said after I told her everything. "They tailor themselves to what a mark wants, and they're professionals about it." "How long?" I asked, sliding a check across the table. "For someone who used her real voice on the phone? Not long. Patricia's tone left no room for hope. 2 weeks later, she called me with the kind of news that makes your world tilt. "Margaret," she said, "you need to sit." I gripped the counter in my kitchen while she spoke. Jessica Miller didn't exist. The woman I knew as Jessica was actually Sarah Collins, 29, originally from Tampa, with multiple arrests for fraud and a record of working with accomplices who pose as family or lovers. Patricia had found images, arrest reports, fake social security numbers, employment histories, the whole house of cards. And Marcus Rivera? Patricia found him too. Sarah's former partner, the man she'd scammed and who'd been hunting her for 2 years. I felt my knees go weak. "Find Marcus," I told Patricia. "If he's been after her for years, he might want to be at that wedding." "He might," Patricia said. "If you want him there, I can get in touch." By the end of the day, I had his number. Marcus, who'd been left with a hotel bill and an empty wallet when Sarah vanished, answered from a construction site in Atlanta. I told him everything, the lies, the money, the wedding date in Charleston in 9 days. There was a long pause. Then, quietly, "She took 15,000 from me. She left me ruined. If you want me there, I'll come." We planned in whispers. Marcus would drive down and wait. I'd been uninvited to the rehearsal. Sarah had convinced Andrew I was the problem, but I knew the venue's back entrance and where the gardens let you slip inside unnoticed. I needed a spectacle so blinding that Andrew couldn't look away and Sarah couldn't spin another story. Over the next days, I became a different kind of planner. I made calls to the event coordinator, the florist, the caterer, the photographer, and told each vendor, in a warm, grandmotherly tone, that the bride's family would be covering the final balance. I gave them a phone number tied to Sarah's fake profile. By Saturday morning, the estate would be facing unpaid bills and no one to reach. I also called Andrew, soft and conciliatory. When he told me the vendors were panicking, I feigned confusion and empathy, even volunteered to take a little weekend trip so they'd have space. I wanted him off the property Sunday morning so the reveal would land without him expecting a confrontation staged by his own mother. When Sarah called that Friday to sweetly invite me to lunch later, I played along with bright manners. "How lovely, Jessica," I said, pouring myself a glass of wine and toasting my reflection. May they get what they deserve. By dawn on the wedding day, I was awake at 5, dressed in a simple black dress and my grandmother's pearls, the very pearls she'd admired. Marcus checked in from a gas station 20 minutes out. He sounded nervous, but ready. "This is it," I told him. "If we do this, we do it clean. For Andrew." He arrived. I found my spot in the back of the chapel, hidden behind a marble column, heart-hammering, knowing that in less than 2 hours the life we'd been living, the one with lies braided through it, would be put on full display. The Bellamy estate looked like something out of a magazine that morning, soft rain falling on rose-covered arches, the smell of wet jasmine in the air. Guests arrived under umbrellas, laughing, unaware that they were about to witness the most unforgettable wedding Charleston had ever seen. I slipped through the garden entrance at 1:30 p.m., my black dress blending in with the caterers' uniforms. No one noticed the older woman moving quietly through the side corridors. I'd planned every step. At 2:15, I was in position hidden behind a marble column at the back of the chapel. My son stood at the altar, radiant with pride, waiting for the woman he believed was his future. My heart ached. In 15 minutes, that joy would vanish. But I reminded myself, sometimes love means breaking a heart to save it. The music began. The chapel doors opened. Sarah Collins, pretending to be Jessica Miller for the last time, floated down the aisle in her $12,000 gown, the pearls glimmering at her throat. I took out my phone and sent one word to Marcus Rivera. Now. The chapel doors burst open again. Marcus walked in like vengeance itself, calm, deliberate, uninvited. All conversation stopped. His boots echoed against the marble as he strode toward the altar. "Sarah Collins," his voice boomed through the silence. "Did you really think you could run forever? Gasps rippled through the room. Sarah froze mid-step, her bouquet of white roses tumbling to the floor. Andrew frowned, stepping between them. "Sir, I think you have the wrong person. This is Jessica Miller." Marcus laughed a sound with no warmth in it. "Jessica Miller? Is that what she's calling herself now?" He pulled a folder from his jacket. "Her real name is Sarah Collins, and she's a con artist. I should know I was her partner before she stole 15 grand from me." A collective murmur swept through the chapel. Sarah's voice trembled. "Andrew, I don't know this man. He's crazy." But her hands were shaking, her mask cracking. Marcus opened the folder, holding up photographs. "Here's Sarah in Miami, running credit card scams. Here she is in Birmingham, posing as a cancer patient to steal donations. And here's my favorite leaving our hotel room in Memphis with my wallet, my watch, and the engagement ring. I was stupid enough to buy her." Andrew turned pale. "Jessica, what is he talking about?" "Lies!" she shouted, desperation leaking through her perfect voice. "He's making this up." "Am I?" Marcus pulled out his phone. "You want to know what she really thinks about you, Andrew?" He pressed play. Sarah's voice filled the chapel. "He's a pathetic mama's boy, Mark. His old lady's already given us over 40 grand. This one's worth 200 easy." A collective gasp broke through the crowd. People started whispering. A few phones were already out recording. Andrew staggered back, eyes wide. "You called me? A mark?" Sarah's tears came instantly. "Andrew, please, I said things I didn't mean. I was angry." Marcus smirked. "Then maybe tell him about your next mark, the one you're already working, the lonely old bat who gave you $40,000? The blood drained from Sarah's face. The silence was unbearable. Andrew's voice was barely a whisper. "You called my mother that?" Her lips parted, searching for lies that wouldn't come. That's out of context." "Context?" His voice was shaking now, full of hurt and fury. "She emptied her savings for this wedding. She borrowed against her home, and you—" His words broke off. Cameras flashed. Guests gasped. And then Sarah's gaze found me. Our eyes locked across the chapel. Recognition flared. She pointed. "You! This was you!" Every head turned. I stepped out from behind the column, standing tall, smoothing my pearls. "I lied, sweetheart," I said softly. "Something I learned from the experts." Andrew's eyes filled with disbelief. "Mom, you orchestrated this?" I exposed it. I corrected. "There's a difference." Sarah's mask fell away completely. "She's jealous, Andrew. She can't stand that you chose me. She hired this man to destroy our wedding." Clever, I thought. Play the mother-in-law card. Appeal to pity. But Marcus stepped forward, his voice steady. "Mrs. Thompson didn't hire me. I came on my own. You want proof?" He held up his phone again. "Here's the recording 3 weeks ago. You laughing about how easy it was to manipulate lonely old women and their sons." And then her voice, crystal clear, filled the air. "The old bat's so desperate for grandkids, she'll believe anything. The son's a mama's boy. Cry a little, and he writes another check." Andrew's eyes went to her throat, to my grandmother's pearls. Her hands flew up to hide them. "Andrew, I can explain," she pleaded. He shook his head slowly. "Explain what? How you called me pathetic? How you mocked my mother while wearing her necklace?" The fight left her body all at once. Shoulders sagging, she whispered, "It started as a job, but then I thought maybe I could make it real." Andrew's voice cracked. "What was real, Sarah? Your name? Your past? Anything?" Silence. Finally, she turned, eyes blazing, and hissed, "You think you've won, Mrs. Thompson? You haven't. He'll never trust another woman again." "You've ruined him so you could stay the most important woman in his life." The words hit like knives, but Andrew's voice was calm. "No, you ruined that, Sarah. My mom was trying to protect me. You were trying to destroy me." That's when two men in dark suits stepped into the chapel. "Sarah Collins," one said, flashing a badge. "FBI. You're under arrest for fraud and identity theft." Gasps erupted. Cameras flashed. The bride screamed as they cuffed her, pearls glittering under the chapel lights. And that's how my son's wedding ended, not with vows, but with handcuffs. The moment the chapel doors closed behind Sarah and the FBI agents, a heavy silence fell over the room, the kind of silence that hums in your bones. 300 guests sat frozen, unsure whether to clap, cry, or pray. The minister just stood there, hands still folded, looking like he'd missed a page in the manual for what to do when the bride is arrested mid-ceremony. Andrew didn't move. He was still standing at the altar, tuxedo crisp, eyes fixed on the doors through which his fiancée, his would-be wife, had just vanished in handcuffs. My every instinct screamed to run to him, to hold him the way I had when he was a child, but something told me this moment wasn't mine to interrupt. Then he exhaled, long and shaky, and turned to face the crowd. "Well," he said, voice raw but steady. "This is awkward." A ripple of nervous laughter broke through the tension. "I'd like to thank everyone for coming," he continued, rubbing the back of his neck. "I know this isn't how any of us expected the day to go. The wedding is obviously canceled, but the reception's already paid for. There's an open bar. Please, eat, drink, God knows I will." The laughter grew louder this time, realer. Guests began murmuring, standing, checking on each other, already texting friends. "You will not believe what just happened." Andrew looked toward the back. Our eyes met. Gratitude. Pain. Something like admiration. He stepped down from the altar and walked toward me, the guests parting instinctively. When he stopped in front of me, the space between us was heavy, with everything unspoken. The disbelief, the heartbreak, the realization. "Mom," he said quietly, "we need to talk." "Yes," I whispered. "We do." He reached up and unclasped my grandmother's pearl necklace from around his neck. She must have given it to him when she couldn't wear it in jail. "These belong to you," he said. I took them, the weight of 4 generations resting in my palm. "Actually," I told him softly, "they belong to the woman my son eventually marries when he finds one worthy of them." His eyes filled with tears. "I'm so sorry, Mom, for not believing you, for choosing her, for being an idiot." I smiled faintly. "You weren't an idiot, sweetheart. You were in love, or at least you thought you were. And that's nothing to be ashamed of." He laughed bitterly. "Guess I got my heart broken and a masterclass in trust issues all in one day." I brushed a strand of hair from his forehead, a gesture I hadn't made in years. "You'll be okay. You're stronger than you think." He nodded, and for the first time that day, I saw the little boy he used to be. "Come on," I said. "Let's face the music. People are going to have questions." The reception that wasn't a reception turned out to be the most honest party I'd ever attended. No formalities, no fake smiles, just raw humanity and an open bar. The band switched from wedding classics to slow blues. Conversations flowed easily. Laughter came naturally. And for once, no one pretended to be perfect. Andrew handled himself better than I ever could have hoped. He moved from table to table, thanking guests for staying, making jokes about the most expensive breakup in Charleston history. I watched him from across the room, proud in a way that had nothing to do with degrees or jobs. He wasn't just my son anymore, he was a man who'd been shattered and was still standing. Marcus found me by the dessert table, where I was debating whether eating the wedding cake of a con artist was bad karma. "Mrs. Thompson," he said, offering his hand. "I just wanted to thank you. You gave me closure I didn't think I'd ever get." I shook his hand. "And you gave me my son back. I'd say we're even." He smiled. "You know, most people would have given up or tried to talk sense into him. You played chess while the rest of us played checkers." "Any mother would have done the same," I said. He shook his head. "No, ma'am. Any mother would have tried. You won." After he left, I stood alone for the first time that night, exhaustion washing over me. The adrenaline had worn off, replaced by quiet sadness. Yes, I'd saved my son, but I'd also destroyed the illusion of love he'd built, and I wasn't sure which wound would take longer to heal. Then Andrew appeared beside me with 2 glasses of champagne. "You look like you're second-guessing everything," he said. I took the glass. "Just wondering if there was a gentler way," he smiled faintly. "You mean, like, sitting me down and calmly explaining my fiancé was a professional criminal?" "Yeah, I would have totally believed you." I laughed softly. "Fair point. You know what convinced me?" he said after a pause. "It wasn't the recording. It was her face when she realized you'd outplayed her. For a second, the mask dropped, and I saw her. The real her. And she was terrified. Not of Marcus. Of you." "Of me?" I said. He nodded. "She underestimated you. She thought you were just some lonely old woman desperate for grandkids. She had no idea she was going up against someone smarter." I smiled faintly. "Not smarter, Andrew. Just motivated." He grinned. "You orchestrated the exposure of a professional scammer using her own ex and the FBI. That's not motivation, that's strategy." We stood quietly, watching the guests laugh and eat and reclaim the night. The band was playing jazz now, couples were dancing, and for a moment, it almost felt like a real celebration. "You know," Andrew said, "part of me's relieved. Not about the drama. Just something always felt off with her. Like she was pretending to be whoever I needed her to be." "That's what con artists do," I said gently. "They study your heart and build a costume to fit it." He nodded. "Guess next time I'll run a background check before falling in love." I chuckled. "Maybe that's a bit extreme." "Maybe," he said. "But one thing I've learned, never underestimate a Thompson woman." I smiled. "Your grandmother would have loved hearing that." He lifted his glass. "Here's to justice served ice cold, with a side of public humiliation." I clinked mine against his. "And to family, and knowing when to fight for the people you love." As we stood there in that ballroom full of laughter and scattered rose petals, I realized something simple and profound. Sometimes the best weddings are the ones that never happen. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, and tell me where you're watching from. And remember, sometimes love stories end not with "I do," but with the truth finally being heard.